Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our Thursday morning Chassidic class on this wonderful Thursday morning, the 7th day of Tammuz, 5781. June 17th, 2021. Okay, now the Chevra on Zoom, just give me a thumbs up that you could see me and hear me. Beautiful. Welcome to everybody who is joining us here, and thank you for gracing us with your delicious presence on this wonderful and bright, beautiful morning. Or evening, indeed, for those who are joining from Sydney, Australia, or from Melbourne, Australia, or wherever you're joining us. Good afternoon, good late morning, good evening, good night, etc. So we are up to page 147, section Vav, chapter 6. We have been exploring the Maamer of Shabbos Shlach Tovshin Tesvav, Shlach 1955. Those of you who want to follow inside, which would be advisable, please open your source sheets. If you go to theyeshiva.net, you'll see the class of Thursday. It has source sheets above the video, below the video. Above the video, you view them. Up below the video, you download them. And when you open them, you go to 147, if Vav. So, I'm afraid if I give a summation this morning, you know what happens, right? We remain in the summation for another few days. So, I'm just going to urge everybody to listen or re-listen to the classes on this Maamer. We already had quite a few classes. And as I always say, if you need, you can do it in double speed. I know some of you are allergic to that. Some of you are big fans of that. But double speed serves a purpose, or at least 1.5, so you can get through the material, if that works for you. But this is, there's a lot here in this Maamer. It's extremely profound, powerfully relevant, and really gives us, I would say, the spiritual science of the human personality, etc., especially in terms of the development and the relationships between our cognitive faculties and our emotional drives and our primal drives, and as a result, our behaviors. So after a long discussion about the relationship between Midos and seichel, stating that Midos, which I translated as the primal drives of a person, are really rooted in a much and far deeper space in the human nefesh, in the human soul, than seichel. Or to use the terminology of the Maamer, while the soul possesses seichel, the soul possesses seichel. The soul is Midos. Seichel is something that the soul possesses. Midos are a mirror into characteristics that are rooted in the essence of the soul itself, so to speak, the chemistry of the soul. And in that sense, Midos are much deeper, much more rooted in the I than seichel. Seichel is something that the soul has. Midos is what the soul is. After explaining this at length and showing also its origin in Kabbalah when we talk about Hashem's seichel and Midos, I'm just quoting the Zohar that we learned earlier. I'm not going to get into the explanations. For those who were in the earlier classes, you know this expression. He also discussed the other side where we find that seichel has so much of an impact on Midos. Number one, in terms of the fact that there is always an awareness, an idea, and a thought that precedes an actual feeling, an actual emotion. There is a cognition, there is an idea and a thought that is the engine that gives life and rise and births. It births an emotion. What is more, he discussed, primal drives, Midos, exist in every single person, exist from the day a child is born, an infant is born. We can see it, it's displayed. And he explained why. Because Midos will never differentiate, because as long as there's a soul, there's Midos. And the soul exists in every person, no matter the level of intelligence, and exists in every single person, no matter their age. Nonetheless, the Midos go through stages, generally 3 stages, Ibur, Yenika, Moichin, which are based on the development of the mind and the development of our awareness processes, and they affect Midas. And the Rebbe said, even though it's true that the Midah itself is never created by seichel, that's true. Midas themselves are part of the soul. I have my drives and you have your drives, and these drives are very deep. It's almost like the genetic makeup of the soul. It's my primal drives. What seichel does is, seichel points a finger and gives labels to reality so that the midos are triggered and aroused as a result of the seichel. It's not that the seichel births the reality of the midos, it just brings it out from a state of concealment to a state of revelation. From a state in which it's dormant to a state in which it's fully expressed and manifested. It's not that it births the midos from nothingness into somethingness. No, it births it in the sense that it brings it out, it brings it to the fore. Because without seichel, without any awareness, without any thoughts, the midos may be there, but they're triggered, they're aroused when seichel points to danger or seichel points to safety. When seichel says, there's a treasure, or seichel says, ooh, that's dangerous territory. So seichel brings out the primal drives into an emotional experience and an emotional, visceral feeling that I can really feel in a very palpable way in my heart, in my body, and it overtakes me. There's always a seichel behind that. It never creates the midah out of nothing. The midah was always there. But seichel, he calls it, seichel is a maramakim. Maramakim la midah. Maramekaimas means references, footnotes. When you write an article or a book, you have footnotes. The footnotes tell you, look there if you want to understand this concept. See there for an elaboration. So he uses this word, that seichel is a maramakim. Seichel is like the reference point, the center for references, like the information center. Midos turns to seichel and says, where do I look to find danger? Where do I look to find comfort? Where do I look for attachment? Where do I look for, where are the places that undermine my primal drives? So seichel gives labels and categories, whether they're right or wrong. They may be completely right, they may be completely wrong, they may be partially right, partially wrong. That's not our discussion, but that's the role of seichel. Furthermore, that's just a maramakim. Furthermore, he said, with the development of seichel, the whole system of the midas develop and grow. After everything's said and done, after all these explanations, the Rebbe comes to a major question. How is it that seichel has any impact on midas? When midas are rooted in a much deeper place, In chapter 5, he explained, you're right, seichel can't affect Midos. Only after Midos went through a weakening process, after they have been diluted and compromised, after they have been weakened, what he calls chalishus, when the Midos are in their primal place, when they're in their primal space and their intensity, there's no hope for seichel. And I would say in a brilliant clarification, the Rebbe said this is for two reasons. First of all, as he said in Yiddish, what was the expression in Yiddish? As seichel is nicht kein balabos of Midos. It's like, you're not my boss, sorry. I was here before you. I was here before you. You're not my boss. Then he said something much deeper. In the world of real Midos, seichel doesn't exist. It's not like we're competing, but I'm the boss. I was here before. In the world of real Midos, seichel doesn't exist. And he explained why. Because the way seichel impacts somebody is through pnimius, not makif. I'm using terms that we explained in the previous class. It's an pnimi, not an makif, which means it has to be enclosed and manifested in the parameters and the identity of that which receives the seichel. But seichel can't enclose itself and therefore impact the real world of Midos, so it doesn't even exist. It's not just it exists, but you're not the boss. Don't tell me what to do. In the world of primal Midos, the Rebbe said, seichel does not even show up. It's irrelevant. It's like you never existed. What a powerful description of what happens in the world of real primal Midos. When the Midos go through a process that they're weakened, here they're in a position where seichel can wield and yield influence, seichel can show up and affect them in the ways that we described above and in the previous parts of this Maamer. In 6, he says, it's still not understood. Because even if this is true, how do the Midos ever become weak? So you're going to say the Midos become weak because seichel makes the Midos weak. Seichel puts a check on Midos. Seichel calms them down. Seichel relaxes them. Seichel tells them not to be so serious, not to be so intense, right? Seichel says, Chevre, baruch sich Midos. In Yiddish, it says, baruch sich. You know what baruch sich is? Michael, you know what baruch sich is? Huh? Calm down. Lanuach. Calm down, don't take it so seriously. When Midos are weak, seichel can impact it, but how do they become weak? So you're going to say through seichel they become weak. But he says that doesn't make sense. Because when Midos are in their primal state, no seichel can have an impact on them, as we explained. So how is it that they ever become weak through seichel? Now we come to the final piece of this Maamer. Perek Vav, page 147. How many lines from the bottom? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 lines from the bottom. Acha inyan hu. The line starts ha inyan hu. 5 lines from the bottom. Acha inyan hu. The explanation and all of this is. Now this is a very deep, very subtle explanation, and it's where we see, I would say, if you get this explanation, you see, I don't know how to put it differently, but the richness, the infinite richness of Chassidus, and how spirituality and psychology are not just a shidduch that, we could put them together and there's sometimes overlaps, but rather that the whole psychology, if it's true, real psychology, which is the study of the soul, is really the study of spirituality, the study of divinity. Acha inyan hu, the explanation in all of this is, somebody wanted to ask something here. Acha inyan hu, the explanation is. Now, I just want to translate Acha inyan hu. This is a very common term in Chassidus, in Maamer. I usually say the explanation is, Ha-inyan doesn't actually mean explanation. Ha-inyan hu means, inyan is like the theme. And inyan is like, when you're talking about a theme or a topic, So you'll say, the Inyan. So he says, Acha Inyan hu. To get this full picture of this theme is as follows. The real reason that Midos can become weaker and therefore open to the information of seichel is because of something we call chochmah, which is even deeper and higher than bina. When we say higher, lamaila, we don't mean higher in a spatial sense. Bina is on the first floor, and bina is on the bottom floor, and chochmah is on the top floor. We're not talking about physical space. Lamaila means it's rooted in a deeper place of consciousness, in a deeper place of the I. Chochmah koyach ma inyan Bitul. Chochmah, which the Zohar says is a combination of two words, koyach ma, the power of what? The core of chochmah is Bitul. Of Rabbeinu Hazaken Betanya, as the Alter Rebbe, the founder of Chassidus Chabad, Rabbi Shneur Zalman of Liadi, known as the Alter Rebbe, the Elder Rebbe, writes in Tanya, Bahagah, in a footnote, and this is Tanya chapter 35. In the middle of the chapter, sometimes there's a footnote. And in a footnote called the Hagah, the Alter Rebbe writes these words, I heard from my teacher of blessed memory. The Alter Rebbe's teacher was the Maggid of Mizrich. This is from the only places in Tanya that he quotes his teacher, the Maggid. Mamash from the only places in the entire Tanya that he quotes his Rebbe, the Maggid of Mizrich. The Maggid of Mizrich was, of course, the prime disciple and successor of the Baal Shem Tov. Baal Shem Tov passed away in 1760. 1 year later, the Maggid assumed the leadership of the young fledgling Chassidic movement, and he served as its leader for 12 years until his passing in 1772, Tov Lamed Gimel on Yutas Kislev. The Alter Rebbe went to the Maggid in the year, I think, Tov Chav Daled, when he was almost 20 years old. That would be 1764. And he had a relationship with the Maggid for the next decade. So the Alter Rebbe says, I heard from my teacher, Pirush, an explanation, V'tam, and a reason. To the statement that's written in Eitz Chaim, the Tree of Life, which is one of the classic works of Reb Chaim Vital, transcribing the major teachings of his teacher, the Arizal, Rabbi Isaac Lurie, Rabbi Yitzchak Lurie in the 16th century. Says the Eitz Chaim that the light of infinity, the light of the infinite one, blessed be he, does not connect even in the highest world of Atzilus, only by first being channeled through the faculty of chochmah. What is the meaning of these words and what is the reason for these words? He says two things, Pirush v'tam. Pirush v'tam. First, you always want to understand the meaning of the words. Then we can understand and try to understand the reasoning for it. So he says, V'hainu, what is the meaning and what is the reason for what the Arizal teaches in Eitz Chaim? That even in the world of Atzilus, what is the world of Atzilus? The world of Atzilus we discussed many times, but very briefly. In the four worlds, Atzilus, Bri, Yitzira, Asiya, we live in Asiya. Atzilus is the highest world, which means the highest paradigm, which means when you put on the lenses of Atzilus, you see absolute oneness. Atzilus is Olam Ha'achdus. It's a world in which it's very obvious that it's the divine infinite energy that vibrates throughout the entire universe. So therefore the entire world is one. It's a manifestation of divine energy. So he says, even in that state of consciousness, the Ein Sof becomes conspicuous and manifested only when it's first channeled through the sphere of chochmah. V'hainu mishum, listen to his words. Mishum she'ein sof baruch hu echad ha'emes. Shehu levadahu ve'ein zulasei. V'zuhi madregas ha'chachma v'choli. Because the infinite one, blessed be he, is echad ha'emes. He is the one truth. He is alone and there's nothing outside of him. And that is what chochmah is. And therefore it's only by being channeled through chochmah that the Ein Sof can be experienced anywhere. Because the definition of Ein Sof is echad ha'emes shehu levadahu ve'ein zulasei. Alter Rebbe's words. What's Ein Sof? When we speak about Hashem, what's the one thing we can say? Echad ha'emes. It's the one truth. Shehu levadahu ve'ein zulasei. That He alone is here and there's nothing outside of it. Ein Sof, infinity, means oneness. It means that there's no space devoid of it. It means there's no reality devoid of it. It means there's no person, no experience, no concept, no emotion that is devoid of it. Ein Sof is echad ha'emes. It's the one truth. What does it mean, one truth? It doesn't mean the one truth that it's the only thing that's true. That's also true, but that's what he means is echad ha'emes. It's the true oneness. That's the translation. Echad ha'emes means it's the true achdus. It's real achdus. In other words, when you're dealing with Ein Sof, it's always all-encompassing. When you're dealing with Ein Sof, it's the true echad. It's echad ha'emes. It's the emes echad. Shema Yisrael Hashem Elokeinu Hashem echad. If you could say the definition of Hashem is that it's oneness. Where there's Ein Sof, there's achdus. There's oneness. Why? Because hu levadahu ve'ein zulasei. Because everything is an aspect of Ein Sof. Everything exists in reality. I'll give another word instead of Ein Sof. Reality. Reality. What's reality? I don't know what reality is, but one thing is clear. Everything is part of reality. If it's reality, it's part of reality. Everything exists in reality. Everything is an aspect of... Where is reality? Reality is in my house. Reality is in your house. Reality is in Monsey, in Sydney, in Lakewood. Where's reality? In Jerusalem. In Jerusalem, maybe you see more of reality. But where's reality? Reality is wherever there's anything, there's reality. Reality, if you're something, you're part of reality. Even a dream is part of reality. So Ein Sof is echad ha'emes. It's true oneness. It's the emes ha'echad. It's the real echad. Shehu levadahu ve'ein zulasei. He exists ve'ein zulasei, and there's nothing that's outside of him. Because everything, every thought, every emotion, every atom, every molecule, every cell, every neuron, every electron, every subatomic particle is a chelik, it's part of reality. It's a manifestation. It's included, it's subsumed in the Ein Sof. And that's the true definition of Ein Sof. And therefore it's the real echad. What is Hashem? Hashem is echad. That there's oneness, there's harmony. You don't have to amputate anything. You don't have to run away from anything. V'zuhi madregas ha'chachma. Comes the Alter Rebbe and says, I heard from the Maggid, this is chachma. And because this is chochmah, the Ein Sof can be manifested in every world only when it's channeled through chochmah. In other words, chochmah is the keli for Ein Sof. What does this mean? What does this mean? He says chochmah is higher than bina. Very briefly, in the faculties of a person, in the soul of a person, we speak about 10 kaiches, 10 faculties that mirror Hashem's spheres, so to speak. And the first one is chochmah. There's chochmah, bina, das, chesed, gvura, tiferes, netzach, chod, yesod, malchus. Generally, the first three, Chabad, chochmah, bina, das, which the Alter Rebbe built his system of chassidus by naming it chassidus Chabad, chochmah, bina, das. And maybe here we'll have a little bit of an explanation, part of an explanation of why he did that. So chochmah is the first. You have what's called Chabad, Chagas, and Nehim. Chabad is Chochmah bin Das. Listen carefully. Chagas is Chesed Vura Tiferes. Nehim is Netzach Chod Yesod Malchus. It's just acronyms that allow us to say the words a little faster. The first three are known as cognitive faculties, or the koiches of seichel, or in this Maamer he calls them moichin, which means they're manifested primarily, obviously, in the brain, which is the seat of cognition and the seat of awareness and the seat of chochmah bin das. It's often also associated in Zohar with different regions of the brain. The Zohar says, Tlas, Chalol, and Inon b'mayach. There are 3 regions in the brain, physical regions in the brain. And today, with the major developments in neuroscience, we know that different regions of the brain are responsible for different ways of experiencing reality. Right? They talk about people, the right hemisphere of the brain, the left hemisphere of the brain, which is generally associated with chochmah and bina. What's the difference between chochmah and bina? Chochmah is the epiphany. Chochmah is what's called a nekuda. Sometimes the Alter Rebbe calls it barak hamavrik. It's like a lightning goes off, like the light bulb moment. Aha, aha. It's a spark. It's a revelation and a revolution. Bina is analysis. Bina is development. It's like the father who produces the seed, the sperm, chochmah. Father is called chochmah, and the mother, which allows that sperm to fertilize the egg and develops both of them into an embryo, which then becomes a fetus that can then give birth. So the father is chochmah. That's the seminal point of something, seminal as in semen, the nekuda. The mother is bina, taking that nekuda and developing it into a full-fledged child, Be'ezer Hashem, and then after 9 months, she births that child, which is where Chachma and Bina and Das come out in Midos, that we spoke earlier about how Midos are birthed from a Tati and a Mami from Chachma and Bina, even though the child itself is really rooted in a place that's higher than seichel, as we explained before. So Chachma generally is the process of Chachma Bina Das is, Chachma is a general idea that pops into your brain. Now the truth is it didn't pop into your brain. It came from unconscious processes happening in your mind, known in Chassidus as Koyach HaMaskil, or Chachma Stima'a, your secret brain. It doesn't just pop in from outside. It pops in from what seems outside because I don't have conscious access to it. And then the Bina can take that idea and further develop it. Das is when the idea becomes of value. It's not just an abstract idea that I understand, I develop, I preach, but it actually becomes a personal value. Das is called intimacy. V'ha'adam yodeh es Chava. Adam knew Chava, which means he had intimacy, he had relations with Chava. Das is, in Tanya chapter 3, Loshen hiskashrus v'hischabrus. You really connect to it. Intellectually, but it becomes a value. Then you have the world of emotions. The world of emotions in which it's not just an idea, but I feel, I'm excited in a positive way or in a negative way. And usually we say, Meichen precede Midos, even though in this Maamer it's not really that way, because here he's telling us the full truth. But generally we speak about emotions as following awareness. In this Maamer he's taking us to the back end, where Midos don't follow Meichen, where Meichen follow Midos. But that's the whole discussion here. If Midos are really higher than Meichen, how is it that Midos are impacted by Meichen? When they are really the parents of Meichen. Meichen is really the child, and Midos are really the parents. So why is it that in reality, we often talk about Meichen as the parents and Midos as the children, when really the parents are children and the children are parents? Which is, by the way, what happens in many homes. It looks like the parents are the parents and the children are the children, and really it's the other way around, but I'm not going to get into a very painful subject, which is not a simple subject, where sometimes the parents are being the children and the children are being the parents. V'hamevin yavin. What is chochmah in a deeper way? Let's go one step deeper. What is really chochmah? Says the Rebbe, chochmah is bitul. Why? What is it that allows the epiphany to enter into my mind? And the answer is an openness to transcendence. Always. A new idea flies in, comes into your mind only when your intellectual ego is subdued. And you could see it. Because when a person is learning and I'm not getting it, I'm just not getting it, or I have a dilemma and I have no solution, I'm struggling with something and I have no way out, I'm trying to learn something and master something, what do they say? It doesn't go in. The parameters of my brain are not allowing the new idea to come in. The new idea is too large. What is chochmah? Chochmah is really bitul. It's the koyach that allows me to say, what? What? The curiosity, the inquisitiveness, and the humbleness of becoming frustrated with my present intellectual ego and opening myself up with complete commitment and dedication to a truth that I cannot wrap my brain around, a truth that I cannot fit into my brain. Chochmah is the openness to transcendence. The real idea of chochmah is bitul, that the I ceases to exist, and because the I ceases to exist, it creates an open space for something that transcends the I to be able to come into the space of the I. That is really what chochmah is. The deep energy of chochmah is bitul, and that's why it's koyach ma. It's the ability to say what? The ability to question everything. It allows me to go outside of my present comfort zone because I get frustrated with my present comfort zone because I don't understand. Koyach ma also means it's a koyach about which we say ma. We say, what is it? It's not clear what it is. The pasuk says in Mishlei, "V'hachachma me'ayin timotze." Where are you going to find chachma? Were you going to find it in the street? The Alter Rebbe says, no, it's a statement, not a question. V'hachachma me'ayin timotze. Chachma is the bridge from ayin to yesh. Chachma gives you access to ayin. What is ayin? Ayin is no-thingness. Not nothingness, no-thingness. Meaning, it takes you to a place where there's no thingness, where the thing is not yet a thing. It's pre-thingness, it's ayin. We call it nothingness because we have no access to it, because it's not in our box, we have no way to describe it, so we call it ayin. Chochmah is giving you access to that ayin inside yourself. And there's always one prerequisite for that. I have to silence all the static. I have to lay still. I have to go into a place of ayin in order to access ayin. Because if I'm in a place of yesh, thingness, I can't access anything in a place of no-thingness. Chochmah is absolute silence. Chochmah is absolute bitul. Chochmah is absolute self-nullification in the healthiest and most beautiful way. Chochmah opens me up to infinity. Says the Magid, and the Alter Rebbe quotes from his teacher. That's why the Arizal teaches us in Eitz Chaim that Ein Sof will never be expressed even in the highest world only by being channeled through Chochmah, because all the other faculties, Bina, Das, Chesed, Word, Tiferes, Netzach, Yesod, Malchus, as beautiful as they are and as significant as they all are Metzias. And Metzias can ish Teufel sein Ein Sof. They are all Metzias. Metzias means they have identity. And identity, by definition, can't channel Echad HaEmes, the true oneness, which is infinite. Because identity means I exist. And that's what makes them tick. Bina has identity, Chesed has identity, Gvura has identity. Identity. What is the identity of Chochmah? That it has no identity. What is the very definition of chochmah? The very definition of chochmah is my openness to ayin. Chochmah is the vessel, chochmah is the keli for echad ha'emes, for the true echad. What's the true echad? Shehu levadayhu ve'ein zu l'asai. That can be felt and experienced in chochmah. And that's why you'll see, when does a person have this type of epiphany? Only when he or she is thinking about nothing else but the idea, to the point that you're not even conscious about the fact that you're not thinking about anything else. Because if you're thinking about the fact that you're thinking about nothing else but the idea, you're still occupied with yourself and you're never going to have that real epiphany. Chochmah often happens in least expected moments, but you'll realize that you were completely immersed in the idea, completely, dedicated to try to understand the idea, and then suddenly, out of nowhere, out of ayin, out of no-thingness, there is a revelation, there's an epiphany, there's a lightning that goes off in your brain, which gives you access to your own unconscious that you couldn't have access to before. Why couldn't you have access to it before? Because there was too much static, there was too much ego, there was too much ich, there was too much I. And chochmah is bitul, chochmah. And that's the reason why when a person has an epiphany, there's such clarity. It's like, aha, I got it. And I say to you, what did you get? I can't talk now. I can't explain it to you. I know I got it, but I can't explain it to you. Why can't you explain it to me? Because the truth is you didn't get anything. It got you. You didn't get it. It got you. There was no you, so that's why it came in. Now is Bina. Bina is I have to reassert myself and bring the chochmah and assimilate it into my kelim, into my vessels, into my identity. So what's the real nekudah of chochmah? The real nekudah of chochmah is not information. The real nekudah of chochmah is bitul to Ein Sof. And therefore, you have new access to information that you didn't have access before. You have access to data, to information that you didn't have before. The real core of chochmah is not info. It's not brilliance. It's not wisdom. It's bitul. It's openness to Ein Sof. It's because, why only chochmah? Because chochmah is bitul. And only bitul is a keli for echad ha'emes shehu levadahu ve'ein zolasei v'zuhi madregas ha'chachma. Again, I'm quoting the Tanya, chapter 35, from what he heard from his teacher. Let's go further. Ve'ein zedoimel lepulas habina b'amidas. You can compare this to how bina affects midas. The pulas habina b'amidas ibederech hislapshus kanal. The way bina affects midas, we said, is how seichel affects midas. It has to go into it. It has to manifest itself in it. It has to be enclosed in it. It's an pnimi, not an makif. Hislapshus means there's two ways of impacting you. One way of impacting you is from above. Hislapshus means the only way I can impact you is when my ideas become yours. They become yours. They redefine your identity. Mashenkin pulas hachachma, and that's why we said that bina can only affect midas when they're weak. Mashenkin pulas hachachma ene b'derech hislapshus. The way chachma affects midas is not b'derech hislapshus. It's not by an argument. Ki im shahabitul the chachma nimtze gam b'hamidas. Because the nekuda of chachma is bitul, chachma introduces in a very profound system. Chachma introduces my primal drives to the reality of Bitul. Sheyesh behem inyan Bitul. It opens up Midas to the truth of Bitul. V'zeu inyan achlishus ba'Midas. And that's the idea that Meichen creates a weakness in the Midas. It's not because cognitive ideas are more powerful than Midas. They're not. Midas are much deeper than seichel. And that's why Bina would never do it. Chochmah has an inyan of Bitul in it. Ein Sof. And when my primal drives can inherit, they can experience Bitul, they can experience Ein Sof, that touches them. That touches them. Because everything is Bitul. You want to go to the emes of it. The weakening of the midas that comes from chochmah is not because of chochmah. It's because of the Ein Sof that is channeled through chochmah. Even chochmah on its own, even though the very theme and texture of chochmah is bitul, but that wouldn't affect the midas, because chochmah is called a sphera, a characteristic. It's part of identity. It's part of my I. We all have the capacity for chochmah in our soul. But chochmah, by definition, opens itself up to the light of infinity that is channeled through chochmah. The way it's expressed in our soul, is that chochmah opens you up to the core of your soul, which is ayin, which is a channel of Ein Sof of infinity. The effect of etzem hanefesh, of the core of the soul, is not by arguing with the Midos and manifesting themselves and expressing their identity in the identity of the Midos till that becomes the identity of the Midos. No. Is that the etzem hanefesh creates a bitul in the Midos because it takes the Midos back to the source of everything, which is Ein Sof, which is infinity. And that affects the Midos. That is the real weakening that we're talking about. What does this mean? There's no way that seichel really impacts Midos in their primal state. Because Midos, as we said, represents the primal drives of a person, and it's really a mirror of characteristics that are embedded in my essence. And therefore, all the arguments in the world, all the reasoning in the world, all the explanations in the world, all the rationalizations and justifications in the world are not going to be able to hold up to the world of Midos. They're good for a paper on philosophy. They're good for an argument in the Beis Medrash or in Shul. But in the real world of Midos, when Midos are in their prime, they can't hold up to it, and therefore there's no hope for them. As he said earlier, seichel is not a balabas. It has no say. I'm deeper than you, I'm bigger than you, I'm stronger than you, I'm older than you, I'm more powerful than you. And when you're dealing in therapy especially, or in real avoid, in real introspection, when people go into that space of Midos, it's very clear that seichel has no say. You're talking about forces that are primal. They're pre-verbal. They're pre-machshava. He says they're not just pre-machshava, pre-seichel. So what happens? What's the issue? I'm not going to say what's the solution, but what's the process that the Rebbeinu Shalom created? There's something called chochmah. And what is chochmah at its core? Chochmah at its core is not information. On the contrary, chochmah at its core is aligning my information with a place that transcends any information I have. It's going into a space of utter silence in the presence of infinity, which no brain can wrap itself around infinity. Because if I'm wrapping myself around infinity, it's not infinity. It's contained, it's defined, it's limited. The only way you can access infinity is by the cessation of any static of self. But if infinity is everything, if Ein Sof is all, if all reality is Ein Sof, what's the part of me that can open myself up to that? The answer is chochmah. Chochmah. And as long as the other faculties are aligned with chochmah, they can have access to it through chochmah. That's the real nakuda of seichel. There's seichel as information, arguments, deduction, induction, reasoning, discerning. Beautiful arguments, great explanations, what should be, what ought to be, how things could be, why they should be this way, and how they're going to benefit your life. It's not affecting Midos. There's one nekuda that affects Midos. Everything comes from Ein Sof. Everything. My deepest primal drives, let's say my chesed, my longing for attachment, let's say my gvura, my longing for authenticity, which is based on boundaries, based on strength, based on discipline. There's chesed, there's gvura. Chesed is attachment. Gvura is authenticity, as we explained in previous classes. Or any of the other midas, the primal drives in a person's life. Ultimately, chesed is an expression of Ein Sof, and gvura is an expression of Ein Sof. When chesed and gvura sense Ein Sof, when they sense Bitul, when they sense the echad ha'emes shehu levado yehu ve'ein zulose v'zui madregas ha'chochmah, this touches them. Because this is not a threat that's going to undermine the primal drives. Seichel doesn't touch Midas because Midas are much deeper. They're more real. In their world, they're much more real. This is me. This is who I am. You want to tell me not to be me? Okay, tell me not to be me. But that's not going to help me not be me. It's going to help you think that I'm somebody else, or it's going to make me meshuga and neurotic. But when seichel can introduce Midas, not to the world of seichel, to the world of Bitul, to the world of oneness, to the world of hula vada yehu ve'ein zulase to Ein Sof, if seichel brings that into the picture, and how does seichel bring that into the picture? Only through chochmah, and not chochmah as a faculty, but chochmah as a channel of Bitul. Chochmah itself is a conduit that says, I don't exist. When seichel exists, Midas will be much more powerful. If they get into a wrestling match, if the heart and the mind get into a wrestling match, the heart wins. Hands down, the Rebbe said. Hands down. Don't think you're going to win your Midas. You're not going to change you. You're not going to change your wife. You're not going to change your kids. But if my own chochmah is a channel for Bitul to the Ein Sof, that's the flow. Midos der Herr Ein Sof. Verkehrt. Midos sense Ein Sof more than anyone else. Because the reason they're so primal, the reason Midos are primal, the reason they're so intense, the reason that in their primal state they're non-negotiable and they are absolute, is because they come from a very, very real place in my soul. And ultimately, mipsari echze leka nasa adam b'tzalmenu kidmusenu, they are a reflection of Hashem's chesed, or Hashem's gvura, Hashem's tiferes, Hashem's netzach, Hashem's hoid. And since everything is an expression of Ein Sof, and everything ultimately is part of that one truth, so therefore when chochmah channels that nekudas habitul, now Midos can open themselves up to seichel, not because of the argument in seichel, but because of the bitul that flows through seichel, the bitul that flows through chochmah, the echad ha'emes shehu levado yehu ve'ein zulase. This is where there's a chalishus in the midas. What do we mean by a chalishus in the midas? That the midas open themselves up. My primal drives don't have to remain completely stuck in their own identity. Why? Because their identity is not being threatened by some outer force that's coming to compete with them. Rather, their identity is being opened up to their own source of identity, which is also Bitul, which is also Ein Sof. Because primal drives too are a manifestation of infinity. And he says, "V'yuvanza al derech hachilik bein Ratzon v'taanug." To understand this, let's look at the difference between Ratzon and taanug, desire and pleasure. The afshish neim boy mitzad etzem hanefesh. Ratzon and taanug both come from the essence of the soul. Hainu she'enam mitzias klal. What does it mean they come from the essence of the soul? They're not a mitzias. Anything that comes from the essence is not defined by mitzias, by thingness. Vehem koiches makifim. They're also known as koiches makifim, which means they're not koiches that limit themselves into a particular structure. Mikol mokim chalukim heim beinyaneim, but they're still different. We explained earlier in the Maamer that Midos reflect Ratzon. You remember? What is Ratzon? Ratzon is not an identity outside of you. Ratzon is you. Ratzon is I want, I desire. Seichel is not I want. Seichel is an idea that I may have developed, and therefore, even after I'm done with it, I write down an idea, it could stay on, and it could live for eternity and have tremendous influence. The ideas that were developed and cultivated years ago, maybe thousands of years ago, can still have an enduring impact, even when the person who conceived them or developed them first, or maybe the only one who ever developed them, is long gone. Ratzon doesn't work that way. Ratzon is about me. Ratzon is I want. That is Ratzon. If there's no I, there's no want. The definition of Ratzon is I. That is the definition of Ratzon. It's very different. That's why we explained in relationships, if you cannot respect the Ratzon of your spouse, then you can't have a real relationship with them. Seichel is all about change. It's all about the fact. It's all about the data. It may come from me, but it's not me. On the contrary, the more me, the less seichel. The more subjective, the less objective. Ratzon is all about subjectivity. Ratzon is I want. And he said that Midos reflect that. And then he said, it's even deeper than Ratzon. We learned that earlier in the Maamer. So now he says, there's Ratzon and there's taanug. Ha-taanug hu pnimiyus ve'etzem hanefesh. Ratzon and taanug both reflect I, the essence of the I. Unlike the other faculties, unlike chochmah bin das, but there's a difference. Taanug is the state of the core of the soul. And Ratzon is where the soul gravitates to. Taanug is the description of I, and Ratzon is the I in a state of longing, of yearning. What is taanug? Taanug is pleasure, ecstasy, delight. This gives me pleasure. Ratzon is my soul is yearning for something. It's running, it's gravitating, it's driven. I want, I desire. Taanug is not I desire. Taanug is my pleasure, my delight. Ratzon is I want. And that's why taanug is deeper than Ratzon. In fact, it rules Ratzon. Ratzon will be a reflection of my taanug. This is my pleasure, hence I want this. And that's why taanug and Ratzon are different, they're divergent also in how they have an impact. The way that taanug works, the way it affects us is through closeness, through drawing in. Ratzon works through a commandment, which means respect, distance. Ratzon is I want. It's like a commandment. I want, and that I want, it dictates everything else. Because if I desire something, that's what I desire. So therefore, because I want my Ratzon, so that Ratzon dictates. But the way it dictates is, as a dictator, it commands from a distance. Taanug doesn't command. Taanug inspires. Taanug warms. Taanug says, this is who I am. This is what gives me pleasure. This is what gives me delight. It operates in a different way. Taanug is kiruv v'hamshacha, and Ratzon is tzivui v'richuk. Ukeshem shebetaanug v'Ratzon, kivon shataanug hu apnimiyus l'cheinu hashalat al Ratzon. Just like in taanug and Ratzon, since taanug is the pnimiyus, it's the core. Therefore, it ultimately rules over Ratzon. Ratzon is the chitzonius of taanug. Kamoikinu gam b'pnimiyus ha-chochmah v'ha-Midos. If you go one step lower, this will explain the core of chochmah and Midos. Shahataanug bizgalusa hu pnimiyus ha-chochmah. When taanug is revealed, it emerges as the pnimius of chochmah. V'haratzon be'izgalusei hu Midos. When Ratzon is revealed, it comes out as Midos. You have taanug and Ratzon. The way taanug and Ratzon evolve or devolve into lower expressions of the soul, Ratzon is manifested in Midos, and taanug is manifested in chochmah, in the pnimius of chochmah. B'meila, therefore, hine pnimius ha-chochmah poel bitul b'ha-Midos. And that's why the pnimius ha-chochmah has an impact. It opens up Midos to Ein Sof, to Bitul, because the pnimius of chochmah tunes into taanug, which is the core of the soul. And therefore it opens up the world of Midos to Bitul. And that's what we mean when we talk about the weakening of the Midos. And once the Midos experience this type of Bitul, now they can be open to the mentorship and to the guidance of seichel, both in terms of being birthed and in terms of developing maturity, as he explained, the different levels of impacts that seichel has on Midos. But it first begins with chochmah, and the pnimius of chochmah, which is the Ein Sof, which opens up the Midos to the world of Bitul. And to explain it more, he said, chochmah and Midos represent the channels of Ratzon and taanug. Midos is Ratzon, the way it's manifested in primal drives and emotions. It begins with Ratzon, and then it becomes Midos, the way Ratzon trickles down. It becomes Midos, but essentially all Midos are really my Ratzon. It's I want. That's what it is. Even if it develops into a whole emotional experience. But if you go deep, deep down, you're going to get to Ratzon. This is what I want. Yeah. And that ultimately comes from a deeper place, which is, this is who I am. This is what I want because this is who I am, and that's taanug. Taanug is, this is who I am. This is what gives me the deepest pleasure. This is what makes me me. It's what makes me tick. That's called in Chassidus taanug. Don't get confused here with pizza tastes good, or ice cream tastes good, or chocolate tastes good. Yeah, it does taste good. But it's also a taanug. There's delicious food that's pleasurable. Yeah, for some people, cholent is taanug, or lasagna is taanug, or rib steak is taanug. There's the taanug of a cup of wine. It's also taanug, it's pleasurable. There's the pleasure of taking a hike, of seeing nature. It's also pleasurable. There's the pleasure of reading a book, great book. Your mind is stimulated. Some people read mathematics and they're so excited. A complex mathematical issue or dilemma, problem that they have to solve. There's the taanug of music. What's the taanug of music? Some people who are very sensitive to music, you hear music and your soul it's one of the deepest pleasures in the world. What music stirs in people, nothing can stir in people. Especially the young. There's something about music, right? It creates a very deep pleasure. There's the taanug of seichel, the taanug of ideas. There's the taanug of relationships, the taanug of love. These are all manifestations of what we call pleasure. He says, but to go back. The core of taanug is not what I want, it's who I am. This is me. Just as in Midos and in Ratzon, just as in Midos, there's the way things trickle down and are manifested as a result of various forces that come in between. The same is true with taanug as well. But if you go deeper and deeper and deeper, taanug is not what I want, it's who I am. Ratzon is what I want. What I want is based on who I am. So he says taanug is deeper than Ratzon. The way that's manifested in a lower level of consciousness, he says that's chochmah versus Midos. Chochmah is not an idea. In its core, it's not an idea. What is chochmah? He says chochmah essentially, He says, taanug b'his galusay hu pnimiyus hachachma. When the taanug is revealed, that's pnimiyus hachachma. There's an expression in Kabbalah, pnimiyus abba hu pnimiyus atik. The pnimiyus of chachma, that is the core of taanug. I'll explain this a little more in the next year, which hopefully will be the last year in the Maamer. But the point here is that pnimiyus hachachma is not the faculty of chochmah. It's the bitul of chochmah. It's the ein sof of chochmah. And that is a flow from the deepest taanug in the person, the deepest core of the person. Midos is a reflection of the Ratzon of a person. That's Midos. I want. And that manifests and trickles down in the world of Midos. Just as Ratzon is affected by taanug, Midos are affected by chochmah. Not because chochmah has information that it gives the Midos. The Midos are much deeper than any information or data or proofs. The Midos, as we said, are a reflection of the I, what I want. They're my primal drives. But real chochmah, which opens you up to the world of taanug, what I am, and that's the bitul of chochmah, because who am I? What is the deepest taanug? I am Ein Sof. I am one with Ein Sof. I am infinity. I'm a channel for infinity. I am part of oneness. That is the deepest I. Chochmah doesn't scream. Chochmah doesn't command. Chochmah opens you up to that ecstasy, to that state of pleasure. And then the Midos melt. Not because you overpowered them. Taanug doesn't control Ratzon. Taanug is the core of Ratzon. He says Taanug speaks with kiruv and amshacha. Ratzon speaks with tzivui and richuk. Ratzon speaks in commandment. This is what I want. It dictates and it controls. When you want something, everything works. When you don't want, nothing works. Taanug is a little different. It's like the difference between the wind and the sun. You know, the argument between the wind and the sun, they both argued which one is more powerful. So they decided somebody's wearing a coat. Who could get him to take off the coat? So the wind started to blow off his coat. And the more the wind was blowing, the more he put on the coat. And the wind blew more, so he made the coat tighter. And the wind blew more, so he tied the coat. And the stronger the wind, the more he was forcing the coat to stay on, despite all the difficulties. And then the sun told the wind, let me show you how do you do it. And the sun started to shine, and it became warmer and very hot. And slowly the person took off one layer and another layer and removed the coat and removed the other garments. Taanug doesn't speak through commandments. It speaks because this is who I am. So in the deepest place, Midos goes back to Ratzon. Pnimiyus HaChochmah goes back to taanug. When Pnimiyus HaChochmah speaks to Midos, it doesn't command the Midos. It doesn't say, you are primal drives, you're not good, you're destroying my life, I'm going to convince you and show you that you're wrong. That's not what it does. It opens up the Midos to the world of Bitul. It takes back to Midos to their real source, which is Ein Sof. And therefore the Midos become weak. Weak not in the sense that they're scared, they're weak. Weak in the sense that they're not stuck anymore in the form of their own identity. Because taanug opened them up to the Ein Sof. So now what happens? So now, at last, the Midos, through chochmah, are now open to a conversation of seichel, but only when that conversation began with introducing the Midos to Bitul, to Ein Sof, not by fighting with the Midos through giving them information, but rather opening the Ratzon to the taanug, opening the Midos to a deeper place. Not what I want, not what I'm driven to, which is Midos and Ratzon, but who I am. And now, once the Midos experience that, now healing can begin. Now seichel can impact the Midos in the ways that it has to impact the Midos. Whether it is the maramakim, allowing the Midos to trust seichel in order to show them and label and categorize life, and even allow the moichin to create development and maturity in Midos. The challenge, of course, in all of this is that distortion happens in very deep places. And this is where the fight of the 10 Meraglim against the 2 Meraglim emerge, as he will explain in the continuation of the Maamer, the last piece of the Maamer. Question. I find this series to be fascinating. Everything we're learning is both intuitive and dizzyingly confusing. So many practical questions. But I have to just sit with the conclusion for now. Brilliant explanations. I second that. Intuitive and dizzyingly confusing. Forgive my mispronunciation. Next question. I translate Inyan as concept. Okay. So what's left of one's self if Bitul has been optimally attained? Well, then the self becomes deeper, because your self becomes a channel for the Ein Sof. It's like, what's left of God's self if he's infinite? Your self becomes much deeper because it's attuned with the Ein Sof. Can you give an example of what Bitul flowing through chochmah can look like in every person's life? Also, when you say that taanug is who I am, it's the pnimius of chochmah, does that refer to the chelik eleka mimal? And also, how can I find out what my Midos are? Okay, these are great questions. Excellent questions. So we're gonna delve into this a little deeper and hopefully with some more clarity in the next class on this Maamer, which will be Monday morning. Just to say a few words here as an answer to your question. Bitul flowing through chochmah is every moment that I completely suspend all my preconceived notions, my confirmation bias, which we all have, They call it confirmation bias, which is basically a bias to confirm my previous beliefs. It's where I silence my comfort zone, all my resistance, and I open myself up completely to a new idea. That's the Bitul that flows through chochmah. That's the uniqueness of chochmah. It's why children, by the way, remember and retain everything in ways that adults don't know how to. Sometimes your child reminds you something that happened 10 years ago, and it was like an event you don't even remember, but they remember it so well. Because they really know how to absorb. They're like wet sponges, they absorb everything. When we absorb things, it's always with an opinion. You're hearing a shiur, it's brilliant, it's boring, it's excellent, I get it, I don't get it, I heard this already, it makes sense, it doesn't make sense. We listen to things with an assertive opinion. Children actually listen. They listen with an emptiness, with an openness. That's an example of chochmah. There's an expression in Svarim, kol gay shaita. Gay is gay yud aleph. Gimel yud aleph. I stand corrected. Gimel yud aleph, from the word gaiva, kol gay shaita. Every arrogant person by definition is a fool. Because the greatest foolishness is arrogance. The definition of foolishness, the worst foolishness is arrogance. So chochmah is when I can really open myself up to that. Is this connected to the chelik eleka mimal? Yeah. In Tanya it says that the soul comes from Hashem's chochmah. And the Ein Sof dwells in the chochmah of a person's soul. This says in Tanya chapter 2 and chapter 18. He says that's where emunah comes from. Emunah doesn't mean blind faith. Emunah means the recognition that there are realities that I cannot wrap my brain around. I don't have to wrap my brain around them. They define me, I don't define them. That is emunah. That is chochmah of the person's soul. And that's really the chelik elokam. Very well said. But more about this we're going to have in the next year. I know a lot of new stuff here and a lot of abstract things. If you understood everything in today's Maamer, then either you're deceiving yourself or you're a very, very, very deep and sensitive soul. Now, I know we have here many deep and sensitive souls, but even if you're a very deep and sensitive soul, there's so many new stuff here and so many intricate ideas and so many deep ideas that you really have to sit with this, as the chatter said, one of the chatters said. So don't rush into trying to understand everything. Learn it, review it again, meditate on it, apply it to yourself, open yourself up to this flow of consciousness, and more will become integrated. I see a lot more questions. Let me see another question here. There is chochmah in Atzilus. It's oneness and singularity. It contains potential. There is chochmah in Atzilus. It is still a world of only oneness, not singularity. It contains potential. So what you're saying is deceiving with all due respect. It's fine, I just don't understand exactly this comment. We are still seeing reality, so it's not oneness. It's duality, albeit in potential. Before tzimtzum chochmah is only a desire in Hashem. I don't know, you have to explain more. You have to explain more of what you mean. This is a sobering thought. The free choice at creation cannot affect the primal drive. There's a lot of different comments on the yeshiva.net. You have to be a little more clear. Next question. So when we experience a aha moment, is it that God made us see it that way? Well, yeah, but what we're saying is that it opens us up to a flow inside of ourselves. Okay, Chevra.
Have you had a question or comment?
Yeah, go ahead.
Rebbe mentioned that Chachma, when there's Bitul, it opens up an incredible opportunity, access to Ein Sof. So
right.
I was thinking that, like, let's say secular subjects versus Torah subjects, it seems like a different type of Bitul. By secular subjects, we have to Bitul to see, possibly even breaking down a paradigm. But by Torah learning, we don't have to be Bitul that way. We have to be Bitul more to just accepting the Torah as it's given to us, rather than the paradigms are. We know the paradigm of Torah is true, so we don't have to deal with the trueness of Torah. That's accepted. All we have to do is open ourselves up to Torah. But with other secular subjects, we have to analyze to see if it's true or not sometimes.
Beautiful.
Yeah?
That's beautiful. That is beautiful. Somebody on the chat asked where they could find the Maamer. So I just put in I just put in the chat a link so you can open that up and find the Maamer. Okay, I definitely did not understand everything. Glad to know that I'm not the only one. I have to listen again. But I love how we explained the idea of listening with a sense of emptiness. I'm going to try to do that when I listen again. Okay, that's wonderful. Okay, thank you very much, everybody, for being here. Thank you very much for your feedback. Thank you very much for being such exceptional students and friends.
Rabbi,
Yes.
excuse me, Rabbi, but I opened the link that you put, and it's all in Hebrew. My husband doesn't
Oh,
understand.
yeah, but I read it through in the class. If you go to the previous class, and I translate it into English.
So there's no translation of the Maamar to English?
No.
Okay.
Maybe somebody wants to write it. I translated, I think, every word, but I don't have it written.
Yeah. No, I know, but then we cannot prepare ourselves for the lesson.
Right.
Only review the lesson.
Right. Yeah, I don't know of a translation. I'm sorry.
Thank you so much.
Pleasure. Where are you from?
Where from where?
I'm saying, where are you tuning in from? Are you in New York?
New York, yeah. Staten Island, New York.
Okay. Pleasure to have you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, everybody, for joining us. I wish you all a beautiful day. A Shabbat Shalom and Mavarach. We're going to resume this class Monday, 7:30 in the morning. Bye-bye, everybody. Thank you. Have a good day.
Thank you, Rabbi. Thank you so much. Rebbe,